Fueled by worldwide economic depression of the 1930s, new ideologies such as communism and fascism spread. Territorial demands made by Germany, Italy, and Japan led to a new conflict that was to affect most of the globe. So, before we head into World War II, let's take a minute to talk about the aftermath of World War One. So, in January 1919, 2 months after the end of World War One, the victorious powers which were also known as the Allied powers, which were the British, the USA, the Soviet Union, France, China, and Poland, met in Paris to discuss a peace settlement. Germany was not represented, and Russia did not attend. So then it remained for the Britain, France, and the USA to decide the future shape of Europe. The primary aim was to weaken Germany so that the perceived aggression of 1914 would never repeat itself. By the Treaty of Versailles, signed on June 28, 1919, Germany was held responsible for the war and forced to pay an enormous amount of money to the Allies. The size of the German army was restricted, and Germany was banned from possessing tanks, military aircraft, and large naval bases. In the east, the state of Poland was recreated to form a buffer between Germany and Russia. It was given a corridor of German territory. So basically, all of German overseas possessions were confiscated and passed to the Allies as mandates of the newly formed League of Nations. Moving on to depression at this time. Economy weakness further undermined any attempt to police the peace settlement. The cost of war had seriously disrupted the world economy, directing money that could have been used for trade and investment into production of weapons. As European countries had diverted resources to armaments, their demand for imported commodities, especially food, also increased. When peace was restored, demand also declined, leading to lower prices as world markets were swamped. Many countries resorted to international loans, and the burden of the enormous interest of repayments, a rise in inflation, in which money became worthless, was rapidly established, leading to further loans and larger repayments. Little money remained for investment or the production of profitable goods. The situation was not helped by the deliberate weakening of the German economy by the Allies. Most of the money generated by German industry or their agriculture was diverted to paying reparations. The new Weimar Republic, named after the town in which the post war German government was set up, faced an impossible task as the German mark plummeted in value. In 1932, reparations were finally canceled, but this action came too late. The world economy had virtually collapsed. Black Thursday, which was on October 24th, 1929, when the New York Stock Exchange ceased to function, marked basically the beginning of the Depression, which was a period of global economic mismanagement, you could say. It lasted for most of the 1930s, creating mass unemployment and social unrest. Policies involving centralized regulation of prices and government sponsored public works projects for the unemployed. First introduced in the USA, were eventually adopted in Britain and France by the late 1930s. The Depression had passed its worst point. Domestic crisis, however, had diverted attention away from the international events that were leading to a new war in Europe. Moving on to the rise of fascism, the conflict was to develop basically between those countries such as Britain and France that believed in democracy, and those that were ruled by leaders who believed in fascism, which was a strongly nationalistic and authoritarian system of government, which had emerged in Europe in opposition to the spread of communism. Fascism had its origins in Italy, where Benito Mussolini was the leader of the right wing group. Um, it was in Germany, however, that the fascist philosophies developed fully. Humiliated by the Versailles Treaty and the economic hardship, um, the German people prove susceptible to rhetoric of Adolf Hitler, leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or better known as the Nazi people, I guess. By 1932, the Nazi Party was the largest in the German parliament. Hitler was appointed basically head of government in 1933. By 1935, Hitler begins to ignore the Versailles Treaty, and also in 1935, Hitler begins to implement the anti-Jewish measures. Um, Over the next decade, Hitler's policies basically culminated in the murder of millions of Jews in the German concentration camps, which will be known as the Holocaust. Um, in the Far East, Japan was adopting policies that closely resemble those of the European fascism. By 1936, Italy and Germany had united to form the Rome Berlin Axis, while Germany and Japan signed the Anti Comintern Pact against the USSR. These pacts created the bloc of anti democratic expansionist states, the Axis powers that possess an under presidential threat to world peace. Um, Weakened by the depression and domestic problems, neither Britain nor France could offer uh, any effective opposition at this time. Here we have like a timeline or time frame of the events going on of World War II. 1941, December 7th, Japan attacked the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, which is in Hawaii. The U.S. basically entered the war at this time. This Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor brought the USA into the conflict. The Battle of the Atlantic was the primary concern for the Allies. New radar aids to detect U-boats and air cover for merchant ships in the Atlantic gradually turned the tide of the battle. In 1943, Germany withdrew its U-boats from the North Atlantic as a result of heavy losses. While this allowed the movement of the U.S. troops and supply across the Atlantic, Germany had to be weakened before the Allies could risk a European campaign. By 1944, Germany and Japan were firmly on the defensive, yet much had still to be achieved to ensure their defeat. In Europe, the Western Allies had to put forces ashore in a liberation campaign known as Operation Overlord. It began on June 6, 1944, also known as D-Day, when Allied troops under U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower and with help from the French resistance landed out on the coast of Normandy, which is part of northern France. Uh, Basically, Paris was liberated on the 25th of August, after which the Allies conducted a swift campaign to liberate most of France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the southern Netherlands, linking up with the units that had landed in southern France on August 15th, also known as Operation Dragon. This map here shows the defeat of Germany from 1942 to 1944. The Allies counterattacked, forcing a German retreat. Notable Allied victories were at the Battle of Kursk during July 1943 on the Eastern Front, and the Battle of El Alamein on October 1942 in Egypt. The final defeat of Germany was assured by the success of Operation Overlord, the Allied landings in northern France, June 1944, which initiated the campaign that liberated almost all of Europe from German occupation by May 1945. Allied pressure on Germany increased. British and U.S. aircraft destroyed German cities in devastating bombings. British and Canadian troops advanced into the Netherlands and southern Germany, carving out occupation zones that had been agreed between the Allies. On April 16th, the Soviet attack on Berlin began. Despite bitter fighting, the city was surrendered within 10 days. And 4 days later, after that, Hitler committed suicide. The Germans surrendered on May 8th, 1945. However, still in the Pacific, the war between Japan and Allies still continued. U.S. bombers flying from China and the Mariana Islands devastated Japan's cities. Still, the Japanese show no signs of surrender. At this time, President Harry Truman felt it necessary to deploy a new weapon. This weapon was the atomic bomb, which had been developed by scientists working on the Manhattan Project. That's what this atomic bomb was called. On August 6, 1945, the city of Hiroshima was destroyed by the bomb. Here we see in the Allied counteroffensive from the east and southwest from the beginning of the mid 1942s, where you see the beginning of the reversal of Japan's fortunes. U.S., British, and Australian forces gradually liberated Japanese occupied areas of the Pacific. Japan's final defeat was secured with the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima, as stated before, and the Nagasaki in August of 1945, which marks basically this is the end of the World War II. And this is where basically we see the end of World War II.